Good morning. I'm Judy Woodward, the History Coordinator of the Ramsey County Library, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this final talk in our Spring 2023 Great Decisions series. Our speaker today is Afsheen John Radsan, who will speak on the topic Iran at a Crossroads. Afsheen John Radsan is Professor of Law at Mitchell Hamlin School of Law in St. Paul. He is an expert on legal issues related to national security, and he frequently writes on issues related to bringing the rule of law to American intelligence activities. Today's program is brought to you through the co-sponsorship of the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute of the University of Minnesota, Global Minnesota, and the Foreign Affairs Association. We are deeply grateful to all these organizations. This talk draws on the 2023 briefing book, which gives background to all the Great Decisions talks. Through the generosity of Global Minnesota, we have a number of briefing books available for checkout at the library. Before I turn the virtual podium over to Professor Radsan, let me just remind you of a couple of tech aspects of this Zoom webinar. We are opening both the chat box and the Q&A line, but we ask you to use them for different purposes. The Q&A line is the main one for you. That's available for questions or comments on the content of Professor Radsan's talk. If you have a question or comment, you can type it in at any time, and I'll read the questions at the end of his presentation. The chat line is the place to go if you're having technical issues. It's monitored by our tech staff, by our faithful Grace and Simmons behind the scene, and that's the place to go if you have questions about or problems with the audiovisual aspects of the talk. We are enabling closed captioning for this talk. You can turn subtitles on or off by clicking on the CC Live transcript button in the lower right-hand corner of your Zoom screen. The program runs for an hour and a half, including both the presentation and the time for questions. We are recording this event for those who are not able to be present for the webinar. The recording will be made available on our website within a few days. Thank you very much. And now let me turn things over to our speaker, Afsheen John Radsan, on Iran at the Crossroads. Thank you.
Iran at a Crossroads. It is a very good title for any discussion about Iran, the Iranian government, the Iranian people. I didn't come up with the title. I don't believe that Judy came up with the title. The title came from the Foreign Policy Association working with Global Minnesota. I think it's a very good title. Thank you, Judy, for your introduction. I'm going to answer the question right up front. Is Iran at a crossroads? Not necessarily. I don't think that this is a more important time than other times in Iranian history. The title is very good because we could also ask, has Iran been at the crossroads? And you might say Iran, given its geography, has always been at a crossroads. We'll put a map up and you can see the various neighbors that Iran has had over history. My parents are both from Iran. They came to the United States in 1962. I was born here, conceived back in Iran. I know that's important to everyone. So I've straddled these cultures for many years. It has been an area of personal study for me. I've also done work for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce back in the late 90s into 2001 when we were trying to promote better ties between the U.S. and Iran. To give you a sense of today's talk, I have broken my remarks into 12 parts, and you'll see there are 3 groupings of 4 topics. And you can take some notes there. We won't leave it up. And it's nice you can track the progress of your speaker. When you get to the Saudi Arabia comment at the end, that's the signal that we're about done. We're into the question and answer period. I don't know whether Grayson or Judy have informed you, but there will be a quiz. on today's presentation, you need to get a passing grade. If you don't, we're going to keep you on this presentation until you get a passing grade, and then we can wish you happy spring and happy adventures. Part of that quiz will be to identify the backdrop behind me, but we'll get to that in a second. Grayson, let's pull the map up if we could. You see the neighborhood there. I've talked about at the Crossroads. We consider ourselves a tough people because we've been fighting off our neighbors for centuries. We started off in the Iranian plateau. First, you had the Babylonians. They were not necessarily Persians, the Assyrians. Persian Empire then expands its influence. There were battles with the Greeks, then the Macedonians take over, the Arabs take over, the Mongols come through, the Arabs came through, Russian and the British. It is a tough place to live. Other than some mountains to the north, the northern part of the Caspian Sea, there are no natural boundaries. So Iran is not protected in the way the United States is protected by oceans. It's not protected by impenetrable mountain ranges. It has been at a crossroads. It is part of the Silk Road, the historical Silk Road of East-West trade. So that's Iran and its location. For those that are betting, is the Iranian regime, is it going to get through this crisis, the demonstrations that started in 2022? I don't know. I don't think that any Iran expert truly knows the answer to that question. People in the Central Intelligence Agency, other agencies, they're trying to answer that question. Will the regime endure? My approach on this question has always been to take the other side of the bet. I have always bet that the regime will endure. Not that it flourishes, not that the people thrive, but that somehow the Islamic Republic, which came out of the Iranian Revolution in 1978, 79, that they will continue. And this is much to the chagrin of people that had to leave the country because of the change in regime, people outside the country that want more human rights and democracy for Iran. The regime is very good at maintaining power. And we can identify a few other times where the regime was under pressure. There was a lot of pressure right after the revolution. You had the hostage crisis from 1979 to 1981, an aborted rescue mission, sanctions. The regime made it through. They negotiated the Algiers Accords. They didn't suffer for their violation of international law. 1980 to 1988 is the Iran-Iraq War. Most of the world was supporting Iraq against Iran. Scud missiles were going back and forth between the two countries. The Iraqis used chemical weapons on Iran. The Iranian regime survived. It made it through that. There were other periods of difficulty for the regime. 2009 is mentioned, coming out of elections that were fraudulent. This is when President Ahmadinejad was elected, probably without a majority of the vote. And then in 2009, we had the Green Movement, lots of demonstrations. The regime was able to endure. It has the instruments of power. It was able to keep its hold on security within the country. There have been other times, disturbances, skirmishes, but the regime continues. They have operated under severe sanctions for a long time. I don't think the sanctions are going to get rid of the regime. What it does is it creates an external excuse for problems within the country. The Iranian regime can blame many of their problems on the sanctions and on Western powers that are trying to limit its independence. So the first point is that if you're listening to this hopeful that the Islamic Republic is going to change significantly, that will have a significant change or a revolution, I'm here to take away some of those hopes. And this could be a topic of discussion for the entire hour that we have about the prospects for this regime, what sort of changes might occur. The second area that I'd like to discuss, and I'm highlighting points that have been identified in the books that were provided through the Foreign Policy Association. The second is that there's something different about this moment, these demonstrations. And that difference is the role of women. What triggered these protests was the killing of Mahsa Amini, a young woman. And this seemed to strike a nerve within the Iranian population. And many of the protesters are young women. They have been showing more of their hair, refusing to wear the hijab, cutting their hair. This act of defiance is spread to other countries. You have actresses in Europe that have cut their hair in solidarity with the women's movement there. There's something different about this movement. I'm not saying that the regime is going to totter, but they feel a different kind of pressure with women out front. We don't necessarily have a leader. You don't even have an organized group. This is more ad hoc, and that may make it more difficult for the regime to put down the protests. The other side of this, the obvious side, is that in the prior protests, when you had young men leading it, I think it was easier for the regime, using the Revolutionary Guards, police, other instruments of power, to crack down on young men, to push young men out of dormitories to their death during demonstrations that we had in prior periods. There seems to be a difficulty here, a restraint that exists on the regime. There are a couple facts that get identified in your briefing book that I would like to highlight. You notice the percentage of women attending university. It parallels what's going on in our country, is that 60% of the people attending university are women. And the women are going to get educated, and they're going to want more of a role in Iranian society. That may be one of the factors behind this frustration, is that they are educated, they're not getting the opportunities, political or economic opportunities, that they expect. For years, when we have been talking about Iran in these kind of presentations, panel discussions, seminars, one of the markers that observers have used in figuring out what is going on in Iran, how much freedom is being allowed, is to track the headdress that Iranian women are forced to wear. And you can gauge where on their head they're bringing the hijab. At times now in these demonstrations, you don't see any hijab. So this is a sign of more defiance. Those that are testing the boundaries, I mean, sometimes it'll be right around here. They're supposed to cover their hair in a Shiite idea of Islamic decency. There's really nothing in the Quran that requires the headdress, in the way that there's really nothing in the Bible that required decent dress or head coverings. So if you're tracking images that are coming out of Iran and you want a sense of what kind of tolerance the regime is allowing or extending to its people, just track the pictures of women and ask yourself, are they wearing the headdress? If they are, young women, university educated women, where is the line on their head? Next point in our first group of 4. This is noted in the readings too. It's another 60% figure that you can take down. 60% of the Iranian population is below the age of 30. It is a very young society that has advantages for vibrancy, for the military and recruiting. It also has disadvantages if these young people don't get opportunities. So I'm broadening the point about women that are educated. You have frustration that's building up within the younger aspects of Iranian society, younger slices, I should say. They're not getting the jobs they want. They're not getting the housing they want. They're moving into other pursuits. And I think what applies in other places applies in Iran, is that if we're concerned about revolution, or if we're hoping for a revolution, often the revolutionaries come from that young, disaffected class. You could do connections to the Cuban Revolution. You could make connections to the Iranian Revolution. The youth of Iran are very active on the internet. Iran is a country of about just under 90 million. They have internet usage that goes far beyond their population in the world. It's a very plugged in, connected society. the Iranian government at times, to try to prevent their organization, to prevent dissent, will try to shut down internet connections, shut down satellites. The Iranian youth have been able to get around those restrictions. It's easy for them to get information and to stay connected to the world. Many of them have connections to family and friends in Europe, family and friends in California. Often some of this programming from the United States is beamed into Iran. It's more interesting than the state-run television. They're quite aware of what's going on in the world. And if I drew a connection, your average Iranian has a far more sophisticated knowledge of developments in the United States than your average American. That stands to reason. The United States is a very important power. We don't have as much interest in the world. For Iran, they are very much concerned with what's going on in the United States and Europe. They can see the effects that American and European policy have on their day-to-day life. Next point in my group, my first group of four, and this is the economic developments. I agree with what has been written in your book, that the economy is weak. There are lots of problems, inflation, shortages. This is a function of the sanctions in part. The price of oil did not go up as high as we might have expected with the Russian attack on Ukraine. Iran's oil industry is antiquated. They need replacement parts, equipment. They're not able to get much of it because of the sanctions. So Iran, the economy is not doing well. The sanctions have had an effect. This hurts the Iranian people. I go back to my first point. I don't think that this is weakening the Iranian government to the point that it's going to topple. And maybe that's a point for discussion when we get into the question and answer. Is do we think the sanctions are accomplishing something that suits American interests? Are the sanctions humane? Should we continue to have the sanctions as a way of deterring those aspects of Iranian government activity that disturb us? We can be clear, there's a support for terrorist groups. They are involved in wars or proxy wars in the region against countries that are our allies, and they seem to be close to a nuclear capability. And there's nothing wrong under international law or their acceptance of non-proliferation treaties to have nuclear energy. The concern is that they will have nuclear weapons. So that's my first group of comments. And if Grayson doesn't mind, maybe we'll just go back and take another look at the outline. So you made it through the first third. Now what I want to do is talk about more politics. This is going to be U.S.-Iran relations or Iran's role in the region. So we talked about the Iranian government. It's not going to topple anytime soon. If you're asking me to bet, the distinctive role of women in these protests, the young aspect of Iranian society, the continued economic problems. The economy was doing far worse during the Iran-Iraq War. This has been the story of the Iranian government since the revolution. They're just different periods of dysfunction. So now I'm going to get to this group of comments right here in the middle. Go back to the map if you want to look at something other than my mug. I might even get creative and try to change my background. There'll be some voting at the end. So this photograph is the same place, but it's a different angle. And one of the questions will be, what is this animal here, this statue? It goes back into our discussion. That'll be on the quiz question. Maybe you're Googling it as we speak. So what about diplomatic relations? The United States and Iran have not had diplomatic relations since the hostage crisis. So we broke off diplomatic relations. We have not restored diplomatic relations since that time. The Iranians do not have an embassy in the United States. We do not have an embassy there. We have interest section. We operate through other embassies to deal with consular matters or other issues that require some form of cooperation, but we don't have a diplomatic presence in Iran. Some of you have been following the news. China was able to broker a restoration of diplomatic relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Now, they had broken off their relations for less than a decade, was over some skirmishes and attacks. They've had problems through the years, but the period where we didn't have embassies between Saudi Arabia and Iran is a shorter period. They now have restored diplomatic relations with the assistance of China. That's also a question is, does this suggest that China is going to play a larger role in the Middle East? Does that mean that they're taking away our role? And we might even ask, do we need to have a role in the Middle East? If oil and gas are less important to the international economy, maybe this region is less important to us. But if you look on the map, you can see how close Iran is to our #1 ally in the region, Israel. Israel can't escape that proximity. Israel considers Iran to be very important to their security. So whether we want to get out of the region or not, Israel may want us there. You notice Iran's neighbors, directly to their west and east, we had 2 wars there. We've withdrawn from those wars. That's created opportunities for Iran in both Iraq and Afghanistan. But that may explain, from the perspective of Washington, why we may want to be withdrawing from Iran in the region, why there's not this great interest in coming up with some diplomatic deal with Iran. So to recap, we do not have diplomatic relations. I'm not sure that we're going to have diplomatic relations anytime soon. Iran and Saudi Arabia have restored diplomatic relations. I'm borrowing again from Lawrence Potter. I think in his article, it's a very important point is that even when you're adversaries, even in the time of the Soviet Union, we had embassies. It is very much the exception not to have embassies. I'm willing to say that the Iranians are less interested in having an embassy there than we are in having embassies. And the Iranians are suspicious of a diplomatic presence because an embassy often can become a cover for espionage activities. When they took hostages in 1979, they accused us of using the American embassy as a platform for spying. They've been concerned about American meddling in their affairs for nearly a century, definitely as far back as the 1940s, when we deposed Reza Shah, considered him too close to the Germans. So I don't know that they are as interested as we might be in having embassies. But let's go to the point. It is dangerous when you don't have communication, when you don't have formal lines of communication. It's dangerous when you have to go through intermediaries. If you're talking to your adversary, you get better information. So I'm agreeing with Lawrence Potter. If there is an opportunity, if the Iranians have an interest in increasing the diplomatic presence between the two countries or formalizing our exchanges, I don't see how that can be a problem. It's very much the exception that countries will not have diplomatic relations through embassies. The next point, and this is the point on the slide about a grand bargain, and this is mentioned in the reading again. I think too much time has gone by. There's too much suspicion between the countries. I don't know that we're going to have some kind of diplomatic resolution with Iran, some framework of better relations. A part of that would be a nuclear deal. So the nuclear deal was not an attempt at a big bargain between the two countries. The nuclear deal dealt specifically with that issue, trying to put off the development in Iran of a nuclear weapon. I think the Obama administration was hopeful that that deal could then lead to other improvements in relations between the two countries. There was a moment in history, and that's back in 2003, at the very beginning of 2003, when there was an opportunity for a grand bargain. You might ask, well, why didn't we get the grand bargain? Why didn't we deal with many of the issues, the problems between the two countries. I would fault the United States. I would fault our arrogance, and I would fault the George W. Bush administration at the time. If you recall, the beginning of 2003, we were doing well in the world. We had just taken out the Taliban. We had not invaded Iraq. We had a very strong military presence. Saddam Hussein was pinned in. You look there, there were no-fly zones to the north and the south. We looked much stronger than we had looked in decades. Iran recognized that strength. Iran signaled, they said, we're ready to deal. It would have been a very attractive deal for the United States, and I think it would have been a fair deal for both countries. We said no. We didn't want to talk with them. We were, at this point in our intoxication, we were talking about 2-for-1, that we would have regime change, not only in Iraq, but that we would have regime change in Iran. We're now going on 20 years. We are the weaker party. Iran has emerged stronger. They're not going to chase the deal. I can borrow from an analogy of the market, the bazaar of haggling over the price of a carpet. Iran realizes they can extract a much higher price. They're stronger today than they were in 2003. If the chance for a grand bargain was missed, the axis of evil speech got in the way of that. The war in Iraq got in the way of that. We have gone down the road of a fiasco in Iraq, and I think our withdrawal from Afghanistan is also a fiasco. And if you look at the geography, in 2001, the two main concerns for Iran were Iraq to the west, Saddam Hussein, and the Taliban to their east. And after 9/11, we took out both of those regimes. We've allowed the Taliban to creep back into power, but they're not as strong as they were back in 2001. Then the next point within this group of issues is the nuclear deal. In prior panels, I mean, we would have 1 hour debating the pros and cons of the nuclear deal. I thought on balance it was a decent deal. It put off the possibility of an Iranian nuclear program. It was a bet by the Obama administration that time was on our side, that the youth of Iran would have some softening of Iran's foreign policy, of their aggression, that they would decide that it was not in their interest to have nuclear weapons. They would decide that they wanted a more normal relationship with the United States and its neighbors. The Trump administration, this was part of their rhetoric to pull out of the deal. I think it was also consistent with what some parts of Israeli society or Israeli government wanted. They believed that it was a bad deal. That doesn't necessarily mean it was a bad deal for us, but there was pressure on the Trump administration to pull out of the deal. They did. It's going to be very difficult to resurrect that deal. There's too much suspicion from the Iranian side back at the American administration, at the Biden administration. There may be hopes. I think the Biden administration is trying to resurrect that deal. Biden obviously was the vice president in the Obama administration. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how you go about getting that deal. This is another topic that could lend itself to 1 hour of discussion. There's many policy papers, intelligence estimates about whether Iran is trying to pursue nuclear weapons, how close they are. Was the nuclear deal just a cover for an underground program or different underground programs in trying to get a nuclear weapon? I accept the premise that if Iran becomes a nuclear power, that radically changes the region. I don't see how Saudi Arabia can then say we don't have nuclear weapons. We don't try to get them, or other countries to feel that they can deter an Iranian threat. And if the main area of concern would be relations between Israel and Iran when they're both nuclear powers. Israel is a nuclear power. From Iran's perspective, from the hardliners, they say, well, why should Israel have nuclear weapons and they don't? They look to their neighbor, that's eastern neighbor, Pakistan, is a nuclear power. And the Iranians feel that they're a greater power than Pakistan, that they have more political and cultural clout. For some parts of the Iranian government, a nuclear program is tied to their prestige. It's a great debate about whether the supreme leader in the Islamic Republic truly wants nuclear weapons. They may say to themselves that a nuclear weapon is the ultimate insurance policy that the regime will stay. Is that if we think about invasion, covert action programs, the deterrence from their part is the use of nuclear weapons. Not necessarily on the United States, but on one of their neighbors. And you can see if you have nuclear weapons that are being lobbed about the Middle East, that is a situation that is far worse than the horrible situation that exists with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Last point in this grouping. That's the importance of religion, the Sunni Shiite split. Shiites are the minority religion in Islam. The Shiites are often in countries that are troublemakers. So Iran is a Shiite country. Iraq is Shiite majority. That is a result of the American invasion of Iraq, is that what used to be a Sunni regime is now a Shiite regime. Lebanon has a strong Shiite president, Bahrain. The concern for Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and others is that the Shiites are rising and that this will diminish their power. For a time, the Saudis and other Sunni regimes, they couldn't believe that we bumbled as much as we did in the Middle East. They thought that this was part of some vast conspiracy to diminish Saudi, Egyptian, Sunni power in the region, that we decided that we would knock out Iraq, the Taliban as Iranian threats to build up Iran as a Shiite center in the region. I don't think there's any truth to that conspiracy, but I understand the concerns that many of the Sunni regimes have with Iran, especially with a resurgent Iran. So this is a dynamic when you watch developments in Lebanon, in Iraq, in Yemen, in that region, is ask yourselves, how does this play into the Sunni Shiite shift? On your map, how does it play into Saudi-Iranian relations? Saudi Arabia would be the main power for the Sunni side of that tension, and Iran is the main power for the Shiite part of that session. So that takes me through the group of four in the second place. Grayson, let's go back so they can see we're in the home stretch. So we're back in the middle there. I talked about the lack of diplomatic relations, how we go through intersections, the missed opportunity for a grand bargain in 2003, the nuclear deal that was signed by the Obama administration. Trump withdrew from the nuclear deal. There is an effort by the Biden administration to try to settle probably the main issue in US-Iran relations, and that is whether Iran is pursuing nuclear weapons or how close Iran is to a breakout of a nuclear program. And then I put out something that has been mentioned in many other discussions about Iran in the region, and that's this Sunni Shiite split. And if we like, in the question and answer session, we can get somebody to remind us about the basic differences between Sunnis and Shiites. I'll just point out here that Iran was, until the 16th century or later, was a Sunni country. It was a way for the Iranian leaders at the time to distinguish themselves from other countries, that they adopted or emphasized the Shiite religion to tie it into the Iranian identity, into Iranian nationalism. That's something that's taken hold. Iran has not always been a Shiite country. It shifted. Today, it's somewhere around 90% Shiite, which would be the flip in Saudi Arabia, which is 90% Sunni. And we're now in the home stretch of the presentation. And if you didn't like this, I have stories to tell. You can ask, well, how did you get the name John? That has a good story. You might ask me about whether I've been to Iran. The answer is yes. And one time I went in 1969. I was a 7-year-old going with my mother and my sister. And then I have a good story of going to Iran in 2001 with the American Bar Association. This is before September 11, 2001. And there was a trip where we went to Beirut, Damascus, and Tehran. And I can make an observation about the political situation there and more to culture. So now we're here in the home stretch, these last 4 points, and then we'll take your questions and open it up into a back and forth. So I'll stop that share. Go back to the map if we want. The reading discusses the role of the supreme leader, the Rahbar. There have been 2 supreme leaders in the Islamic Republic. One was Ayatollah Khamenei, the leader of the Iranian Revolution. This was a concept that he came up with, to have a guardian of the faith as a part of the political system, to mix religion and politics very directly, to have a religious overlay on all politics. The next and the continued supreme leader is Ayatollah Khamenei. And right there, I want everyone to get the difference in pronunciation. Khomeini does not equal Khamenei, and that'll be one of the test questions at the end. So Khamenei did not have the religious credentials that Khomeini did. He was not even a full Ayatollah. He was a political cleric. He had the backing of many parties. He was a consensus to become the supreme leader. There was another cleric that you've heard about who was the president, Rafsanjani. His credentials were not high enough. He was not politically shrewd enough to become the supreme leader. So Khamenei has been the supreme leader for a long time. And when you think about the role of the supreme leader, I'm going to offer an analogy back to the Soviet Union. Iran has branches of government. You have a legislature, you have courts, you have a presidency, you have all of these organs that we would see in other countries that are familiar to us. Those organs have power up to a point. They can always be overridden by the supreme leader. The supreme leader can decide that something is not consistent with Islamic law, it's not consistent with the constitution of the country, and that decision of a court, decision of a legislature can be overruled. And if you think about the Soviet Union, you had all these formal aspects of government, but the Communist Party and the party chair could override anything that was going on. So if you're trying to follow what is Iranian policy, you should follow the supreme leader. The supreme leader operates more in the shadows. The supreme leader, he's not just one person. He has various advisors, and he has people that support him. The Revolutionary Guards, something created after the revolution, a military force, they work with the supreme leader. They probably don't want to have one of their people emerge as the head of the country. They may not have anyone with religious credentials that will allow them to be selected, but they're going to be influential in deciding who is the next person to succeed Khamenei. He's not necessarily in bad health, but he's an old man. There's already talk about who will be the new supreme leader. And this supreme leader is selected from a group that was largely selected by the supreme leader himself. So there's an assembly of experts. They will decide the next supreme leader. The people on the assembly have been picked by this supreme leader. It's not going to be subject to public vote. It's not going to be subject to discussion in the parliament or the majlis. It's going to be more like the coronation of a pope or the election of the Communist Party chair in the Soviet Union. It's very difficult for analysts outside of Iran to figure out the machinations around the supreme leader, it's even difficult for people within Iran, even Iranian politicians, to know what does the supreme leader favor, what does he disfavor. The other aspect of the supreme leader's power is that he and his guardian council, also largely selected by him, they will decide on the Islamic qualifications of candidates for office. You can see this kind of check that they have of who is going to be acceptable to run for president, to run for parliament, to be a judge. This is this override, this Islamic override that exists. We're at a point now where the presidency and the supreme leader, they seem to be in tune. You have two religious conservatives, Khamenei and Raisi, as the president. That was not always the case. When I talked about my experience for the US Chamber of Commerce, when there was this hope for an opening or an improvement in US-Iran relations, that was back in the late 90s. Many of you probably remember President Khatami. He was a former culture minister. He was a cleric. He was considered much more of a reformist. And at that time, there were differences, significant differences between what Khatami wanted for the country and what Khamenei wanted, what the president wanted and what the supreme leader wanted. The result was Khatami has been marginalized. The supreme leader continues. That opportunity for reform in Iran disappeared. That opportunity in the late 90s, leading up to the period of the Grand Bargain, that changed. It was a very exciting time in Iran itself and for Iran observers. And a way to tap into that would be to watch many of the movies that were coming out of Iran at that time. Great movies drawing on stories from Iranian society. So the point that I'm alluding to is the importance of the succession. What is going to happen? Will this be a consolidation of power? Will it cause some breaks as you have various candidates positioning to become supreme leader? How good is the supreme leader's health? How many more years will he live? When are we going to have that succession? I don't know. Whenever it is, it's going to be very important. You can see already some maneuverings about who is going to succeed the current supreme leader. If you're interested in this succession, what you might do is then look at the maneuverings that went on after Ayatollah Khamenei, the first supreme leader, died, and the selection of Khamenei as the supreme leader. And you'll notice that Rafsanjani was brokering the deal once he understood that he was not going to become the supreme leader himself. And that can become a template for studying the succession. That, I'm suggesting to all of you, is a far more important succession than the presidential election. We get caught up in the presidential election because we project and mirror the importance of the American presidency onto Iranian society. I'm reminding you that that's not the main place of decision-making in Iran. You want to pay attention to the supreme leader and the various shadow bodies that the supreme leader has created, a foreign advisor, an intelligence advisor that go upon the ministries and the military. Second to last point here is the importance of Iranian culture, and as it plays into Iranian pride. I don't know whether I fit in. I think I do. Iranians are known as being arrogant in the region, or prideful, and there's a thin line between prideful and arrogance. They are one of the few cultures that has been in place for thousands of years. They're one of the few parts of this region that have maintained their identity. It's one of the only places that was conquered by the Muslims and retained its language. All the other countries became Arabic speaking as the Islamic movement spread through the Middle East and North Africa. And you could credit the poet Ferdowsi, who wrote the Book of Kings, wrote it in Persian for preserving preserving that linguistic heritage. The Iranians are very proud of their poets. There are a few countries out there where people can quote poetry on the street. Iran is one of them. Russia is another. They revere their poets. And if you're looking for common ground in any discussion with an Iranian official, with an Iranian person, throw out the name of a poet. Ask them about Hafez. Ask them about Sa'di. Rumi or Maulana is very much in vogue in the United States. You can throw Rumi out. You might even mention that Madonna did a song with Rumi lyrics. That will show how hip you are and how knowledgeable you are about Iranian culture. It's very important to them that you understand that they're not Arabs. It's one of the distinct ethnic groups in the region. They're different from Arabs. They're different from Turks. They're different from Jews. Some Jews in these other countries, but Israel is still a Jewish country by the majority of the population. If you want, the other side, if you want to offend an Iranian, lump them in with Arabs or ask them how good their Arabic is, assuming that Arabic is the day-to-day language. So Iran, they are not Arabs. And there's some tension or maybe even disdain between Arabs and Persians in the region. And this has gone on for thousands of years. My last point, and it's a hopeful point, is why do we have such a troubled relationship? I understand you had the hostage crisis, you've had Iran supporting terrorist groups. Iran has done things that are inconsistent with US interests. What I was doing back in the 90s, though, we were going to American companies and asking them to engage with Iran to try to improve relations. And on a board, we would put facts. In this country, women are not allowed to drive at the time. In this country, they are allowed to drive. In this country, you have no women that are members of their parliament or legislature. In this other country, we have women there. In this country, this is the level of literacy or people that have a university education. In the other country, it's much higher. And you would lay this out and you would then reveal that, well, one country was Saudi Arabia. 15 of the 19 hijackers on 9/11 were Saudis. Yet we continue to have good relations with Saudi Arabia and we have very poor relations with Iran. And I'd like to close with that question, a rhetorical question to all of you, is why is it that we get along with Saudi Arabia, continue to get along with Saudi Arabia, with a leader that has journalists killed and dismembered, but we can't get along with Iran? Is there some opportunity for leveling this, to have a more guarded relationship with Saudi Arabia and a slightly better relationship with Iran? I hope that that's the case. If we improve U.S.-Iran relations, we will improve the situation in the Middle East. I think there's no doubt about that from the perspective of Iranians, Americans, and people in the region. We can take the map down. I'm even going to take down my screen.
So are you ready to take questions?
I am, Judy. I'm inviting people into my office here. And you see in the back, I have a tea service. So if anyone wants some tea, I'll serve that to the group.
Okay. And I think that I should say, just in case anyone really took seriously your threat of springing a pop quiz, that I suspect you were not serious about that. So I hope everyone took notes for their own pleasure, but not because there was going to be a pop quiz. We do already have several questions in the Q&A line. I believe we have time for more. So I will say to the audience, now's your chance. Put your questions in the Q&A line. I will read them. In listening to your summation, I also was kind of wondering why our relations, despite, things like the murder of the Saudi journalist, why our relations with Saudi Arabia are so much warmer than our relations with Iran. And if you have thoughts on that, the answer to that, I would like to hear them.
The Saudis historically have managed this relationship. We've had a strong continued American presence in Saudi Arabia. While Americans have been there, the Saudis have learned about us. The Saudis have educated their elite in the United States and England. There are ministers, you listen to them and they speak English as if they're American, but they're 100% Saudi. The Saudi money that is spread everywhere within the American system. And there's also this dependency on Saudi oil. Is that if Saudi oil is cut, it will damage the American economy in a way that the lack of access to Iranian oil doesn't affect us. The Saudis, and I'm not saying they're doing it illegally, but they have lots of consulting firms. They support academics. If you go back to the 9/11 Commission, there was a portion of the report that talked about what the Saudis were doing, whether there was any money that went to the hijackers. The Saudis pressured for much of that not to be revealed to the American public, for the American public not to realize what's going on in Saudi Arabia. And one last, I don't know that this is true anymore, but what we used to say back in trying to engage better US-Iran relations is that if you went to Saudi Arabia and had a free election, you would have a candidate very much in line with the Taliban or Al-Qaeda winning. Is that the people of Saudi Arabia do not love us. Many of the people there, they hold it against us because they think we have propped up the regime in Saudi Arabia. In Iran, it's the opposite. For a long time, maybe that's changing as time goes away from the revolution. The Iranian people know that we don't like their government. Their government doesn't like us, so they don't accuse us of propping up their government. And many of them see the United States as a source of hope, as a place to get support for human rights, political rights, for a more modern approach to Islam and Islam in the 21st century. They have ties to people that I believe are more embedded in what we would call everyday American life. Iranians living in Los Angeles. So when they think about the United States, they think about it in a more warm and fuzzy way. I'm not sure that your average Saudi thinks about coming to the United States as a place to have fun. When they want to go and have fun, when they want to go with their excesses, they go to London, and I think they keep it more undercover.
Okay. All right, well, let's start the questions here. The first question, do Shia Muslims, the Shia governing party in Iran, believe that women are not equal are not equal in terms of being independent beings? Why do they seem so afraid of independent and educated women in Iran?
From a doctrinal point, I don't know that they consider women to be inferior. If you're talking about the supreme leader, from a practical standpoint, they consider women to be inferior or not to deserve the opportunities that men do for political power. It's hard to explain it without seeming that I'm justifying it. This is a carrying over of patriarchy. It's a patriarchal society. Shiite Islam allows, you don't have people practicing it, allows polygamy. A Shiite can have 4 wives. A Shiite can have temporary wives. This is temporary marriage, which is a kind of cleric-endorsed prostitution. There are many of these things that should be troubling to women, and women as full participants in a society. The hopeful part, and maybe this ties into is many of these clerics have daughters, and I think as a parent, they want the best for their daughters, and the daughters are going to university. The daughters are listening to talks on YouTube. The daughters see movies and read. It's hard to keep the daughters isolated in a 7th century approach when the rest of the world is modernizing. And when they think about the world, many of them think about France, the United States, England. That's going to affect the discussions between father and daughter, father and wife, and I think that plays into the current disturbances. If you see a lot of this pent up frustration by women that have been held out of roles in society, and many of the women are carrying the men economically because the men cannot get jobs.
But at least it's our impression that unlike other parts of the Middle East, prior to the revolution, women in Iran enjoyed a more active public role. And so it seems confusing to us why this suppression of women has lasted so many decades, since there was a tradition of educated, active women before the revolution.
Judy, it's a very good question. I'm going to split it in two parts. If your reference is 1969, 1973, those are the times that I went to Iran, and you look at what women could do then, and then you compare it to today, we've gone backward. We've gone backward. Dress, ability to go to a restaurant, travel, education. My mother was able to run track and field in the 60s. Her dad was more progressive than other fathers. There are some people grumbling, why is the Mossadegh girl running around naked? I mean, she had her tracksuit on. If that's your reference, you're going to be disappointed. Another reference would be to compare. Would one rather be a woman in Egypt today or Iran, in Saudi Arabia today or Iran, Jordan or Iran? Then I think it's a much closer call. And I believe we get hung up, or we give too much weight to the hijab. Maybe it's not required in Morocco, and it is required in Iran. Because of the economy and opportunities, I think it's a close call. Would a woman be better off in Morocco or Iran? Is that if you compare Iran to its neighbors, there are very few countries in the region that treat women as equals, from not only in a doctrinal sense, but a practical and political sense. It's not a great region to be a woman. If I were a woman, if you ask me, where would I go, or where would I want my daughter to go? I don't have a daughter. What would be a good country for my daughter? Well, Canada, Sweden, Norway, Iceland. You can see, I'm not going to get anywhere close to the Middle East. A woman in Pakistan, India, I'm not even sure. So I'm not going to even tie it just to Islamic countries. And it's a very important issue. I'll say what, let me call, sometimes in our foreign policy, we may give this too much weight. I think that's part of the reason that we stuck in Afghanistan for as long as we did, is we really thought that we could convert Afghanistan into a modern country with female empowerment. And maybe the goal in Afghanistan was and should have been eliminate the Taliban, prevent Afghanistan from being a sanctuary for Al-Qaeda, and then to recognize the limits of what America can do, and to accept there are going to be women in Afghanistan that don't have the opportunities that women in Sweden have. And it's not part of our nature as Americans. We want to spread our ideas. There is a lesson though about humility. Look the long run for Afghani women. We got their hopes up 2010 until 2020, and then look what's happened to the country again. That's a question for everyone. Was it worth it, or should we have pulled out sooner?
Okay, let's move on, because we do have many questions by this time. I think you've spoken.
If this guy said there's going to be a quiz, maybe they would say he's not joking. So this is Ayatollah Khamenei, the first supreme leader, right. And this is the current. You better to smile. This is the current supreme leader, Khamenei. Those are the two supreme leaders that I referred to. And the advice that I'm giving myself and others is, because Iranians, we have these harsh features. Try to smile, then we're not as threatening. See, he's doing a better job.
I think it's something about the ears in the second fellow too.
It may be.
All right. I think you've addressed the second question, but perhaps you want to add to your original. Was Trump correct in repudiating the nuclear arms agreement with Iran? I thought it was a matter of Trump shooting himself in the U.S. in the foot, but I could be wrong. I'm quoting the speaker now, or the questioner. What do you think about that? Would you like to add anything to your earlier remarks?
what I did a program, I can't remember, it was on Minnesota Public Radio. We were talking about Iran, and it was right after Trump was elected. I predicted that he would stay in the deal. I said it makes so much sense. I predicted that he would huff and puff about Iran. I said he's a deal maker. He respects, he said he respects Persian deal makers. I said he's going to huff and puff, but he won't be so nearsighted, so ideological to pull out of the deal. I was surprised that he pulled out of it. I think it was a mistake.
Mhm.
They were hiding their program. They were playing games, but we had a lot more. We had a framework for inspections. We had a better way of
Mhm.
monitoring their program with the deal and delaying their ability to have a nuclear program. So if you walk away from something, you should walk away with the idea that the new situation is better for the United States. And I don't see that it was. And I don't know that Trump explained to us how it was better. The people who are pushing him to do that, they're not as sophisticated as this audience. Iran's bad. Anything that Iran gets is therefore bad. And I'm going to take my negotiating ball and go home. It wasn't a very good deal. Could the Obama administration have been tougher in the deal? Did they give up, freeing up assets? Maybe. And did the Iranians see that Obama was hungry for a deal in his second term? Yes. But does that means they extracted on some of the financial terms? We didn't include their missile development in that. But still, if you look at it, even from the perspective of hard-nosed Iran hawks, it didn't seem to be a bad deal. When each side complained about it, that struck me as an indication that it was a reasonable outcome for both countries.
Yeah. All right. How would you describe Iran's relationship with Pakistan?
For a long time, we saw connections between Pakistan and Iran on the nuclear program.
Mhm.
American policy was good at preventing this leakage. We put pressure on the Pakistanis, so that was a source of trouble. The border that Iran has with Pakistan is not secure, and some of the problems of that region are then connected to Pakistan in the same way that Afghanistan's problems are often connected to Pakistan. I don't believe Pakistan is meddling in Iran. I don't think Iran meddles that much in Pakistan. I don't think that there's a significant relationship between the two. They're both Muslim countries. I think if you go and ask your average Iranian, if you ask an Iranian leader, say, is Pakistan, even though it's a nuclear power, are they on your level as a country and a culture? And you're going to get, I can say these things from the safety of my office here. This plays into that Iranian pride. The nuclear program was popular because they say we're historically, culturally, politically, we're as good as Pakistan, and they've had a nuclear program for a long time. There's a frustration too, is that Pakistan was able to develop a program, even when we were trying to prevent them. Maybe there's more pressure on Iran, or more efforts to prevent them from getting a nuclear program. But I flip the question. Ask Israel, are you that concerned about Pakistan? No. Are you concerned about Iran? Yes. Has Israel been involved in trying to set back the Iranian nuclear program? For sure. Killing Iranian scientists, cyber warfare on their generators. Israel views a nuclear program in Iran as an existential threat. Israel does not view Pakistan's nuclear program as an existential threat.
Along with that, you underlined the reluctance of Iranians, or more than reluctance, the disdain with the idea that being confused for Arabs. But is there any ethnic connection between Iran and its neighbors to the east of Pakistan and Afghanistan? Is there an affinity, an ethnic affinity that we don't hear? In other words, that Iran is going to go to war with Afghanistan or Pakistan, unlike Iraq, its neighbor to the west.
on Afghanistan, I'll remind back under the Taliban, I'm trying to think, it was in Herat. So in Afghani town, the Taliban killed, it was a consular off, killed a number of Iranian diplomats. Iran and Afghanistan almost went to war. And if we remember, when we were supplying the Mujahideen, when we were supplying them against the Russians and against some of the more extreme, the Taliban elements, we both were supporting the Northern Alliance, Shah Massoud, who is an ethnic Tajik. So there have been tensions between the Iranian government and the Taliban government. That may repeat itself now that the Taliban have ascended in Afghanistan. You're right, Judy, that Iran has many ethnicities that live within the country, and I think that then helps with some connection. So you have Turkmenistan, and you have ethnic Turkmens that live in Iran. There's an opportunity. You have Azerbaijan that is Iranian, so you have ethnic Azeris that live in Iran. You have a country of Azerbaijan that creates some ties. The Baluchis are in the tribe that exists in southeastern Iran. They sometimes go back and forth over the border in Pakistan. It creates links. I'll leave very much on this point about Arabs. During the Iran-Iraq War, on the border with Iraq, there are many Arabs, ethnic Arabs that are Iranian citizens, and they were trusted to fight in regular military units on behalf of the Iranian military against Iraq. So even though there's that cultural tension, Iranian nationalism was strong enough that these Iranian Arabs felt an allegiance to Iran and fought on behalf of Iran. They didn't have to take them away from there, put them in areas. They didn't view them as a place of subversion or sabotage. So I don't want to overplay this, but the identity is we're Persian. We're Persian. Okay. We're Persians. We're Persian speakers, and we're in their Facebook. We're different. We're different from Arabs.
Okay. All right. Moving on. What is the religious differences? What are the religious differences between the Sunni and the Shiite strands of Islam?
The historical difference was a debate about who should succeed the Prophet Muhammad as a leader of the Islamic community. The Sunnis were the Democrats. They said, well, we should vote on this. The Shiites believe more in lineage, so that the prophet's son-in-law would get it, Ali, and then you have this shift. There were other explanations between the economic differences, political differences. One of the doctrinal differences is that the Shiites have much more of a role for clerical interpretation in the way that the Sunnis don't. So you're even before the revolution, you had active discussion in Shiite seminaries. Then we had Shiite clerics that decided to go political. There are some great Shiite thinkers that believe that Khomeini made a mistake by getting Islam connected with government. And Khomeini took power. You don't have the role that same role of clerics and that clerical conversation in the Sunni version. The Sunnis are a majority, so they don't have this inferiority complex. They've often been connected, Sunnis, to richer aspects of Islamic society. So it's not tied into reaching up to get economic opportunity. I think that's an outline. I'm thinking to myself, is you notice the wall back there, that dark color blue? That's an official Duke blue, and then this is a light blue. And imagine if somebody asked, well, why do you two dislike each other so much, North Carolina and Duke? I mean, there'd be a very basic answer, but the true answer would probably take days.
A follow-up question that some of us, when we think of religious differences, we think of it in terms of differences, the Northern Ireland situation, differences between Catholics and Protestants, or the religious wars of Europe of the 17th century. Is that a useful framework for understanding the difference between Sunni and Shia?
At a general level, yes, because we're now at a point in the United States and Europe. I think the majority of people are non-believers.
Mhm.
So it's hard for an average European, your average American, to take religious differences that seriously, to take doctrinal disputes seriously, and then we associate sectarian disputes with those people in the Middle East. And I think your
Mhm.
example is good, is to remind much of European history was about settling these sectarian disputes with
Yes.
a king in England that wanted to get married and was told that he couldn't by the Pope. And then we have Protestants and Catholics, and then it plays out into Ireland. Is that somebody in another part of the world, maybe Latin America, looking at this, and the Irish and the English, they look very similar. They're both Christians. Why
Yeah.
are they fighting? And it's a reminder. I mean, there are differences that they don't just sync up, but it's a reminder that people will fight and kill
Mhm.
over what seem to be very minor doctrinal differences,
Yeah.
cultural
Yeah.
differences, historical differences. If they want to fight about that, they will, until one side wins or until they wear each other out.
Yeah. If you don't believe that recent protests will topple the Iranian regime, do you believe that the regime will make adjustments or changes in response to these demonstrations? And if so, what might change look like?
For, they, yes, they will make adjustments. It is an adaptive, but they're not doctrinaire. So they're going to ask themselves, well, if we can make some concessions and the disturbances go away, they will make those concessions. If they think that it's going to be seen as weakness or an opportunity for foreign powers to meddle, they may decide to clamp down. So one of the main areas of measuring this would be the morality police. I mean, they're tolerated by the government, the Revolutionary Guards. They go around and decide whether somebody is behaving consistently with Islamic law. Is the headdress proper? If you're getting close, a man and a woman are close. Are they married? Are they too close? And they can grab people and put them into the bus and take them to a prison. This is a kind of arbitrary check on the society. Yeah. That would be an adjustment. The supreme leader and others, they said maybe we need to stop some of that stuff. Every day they're deciding with protests what to do. I think protests in Tehran are viewed differently from protests in other parts of the country. That the Tehran protests are seen as more of a direct threat. Something that they've done in the past, I mean, I'm flipping it, is if you have college kids protesting in Tehran, they'll bring in vigilantes, supporters of the regime that are from villages that don't have the connection, and they feel that the college kids from Tehran are pampered, and those people are willing to serve as morality police or to crack some heads if necessary. The people that have guns in Iran, are within the chain of command that goes to the supreme leader. That's military, interior, the police, the Revolutionary Guards, and I think most of them are still willing to carry out the orders. If you reach a point that the supreme leader is an old man, he can't fight himself. If you reach a point where people will not carry out the orders, then you've had a revolution. That's what happened to the Shah and some of his generals that stayed there, is that the troops would not fire on the protesters. I don't think we're anywhere close to that. But is there a chance for things to improve for Iranian people, Iranian women? Yes. What I don't know is, does that occur? Does that just occur internally? Are they better off by our staying hands off? The article mentioned is you don't want to get involved because then you'll taint these people as toadies of the United States. So if you're going to provide support in any way, it should be performative or it should be in a way that you don't show the support that the people are getting there.
Mhm. The next question is one word only, but I believe it refers to your backdrop, your screen background for most of your talk. The question is Persepolis?
Whoever's playing Jeopardy got what is Persepolis for $500 is correct.
And could you talk about the animal?
I'm not.
Statue.
I think it's a combination of a bird. It's a mythical bird that comes from Zoroastrian folklore. I think, but I need to check on my archaeology. And for the full audience, I mean, what is the significance of Persepolis? It was one of several palaces by the Persian kings, the Achaemenid kings that are there from, let's say, approximately 400, 500 BC. And the Persians, in spreading the empire, they conquered all of Anatolia, modern day Turkey, turned it from Greek into Persian, and then the battle line was for the mainland of Greece. And during one of those battles, when the Persians were trying to get the entire Greek peninsula incorporated into their realm, they took over Athens and they burned the Acropolis. Historians say maybe this burning of Persepolis, this is just what's left of this huge palace, was payback for what the Persians did. The historical accuracy, though, is that Alexander the Great was not technically a Greek. So if we learn nothing else, Alexander the Greek was a Macedonian. So this was Macedonian payback over there. It's also a lesson in arrogance. He tried to then conquer what was beyond the Indus River. They got bogged down in the mountains and disease. Alexander dies in his 30s. One point on Persian culture, though, Alexander was so captivated by Persian culture in the Persian telling that he took a Persian wife, Roxana. He had many of his generals take Persian wives. And then this is a story that Persians say is that even when they're conquered, their charm and culture will take over the conqueror, whether it's Alexander, whether it's the Arab invasion, whether it's the Mongols coming through, is that they were able to adapt and get the invading country to incorporate aspects of their culture, or in Alexander's case, their political administration. The Persians were good at running an empire. This was new to Alexander.
Yeah, but the word Persepolis, that sounds like a Greek word. Is that not Greek?
For sure. And this is, and if I could see the audience, I'd have them practice. I think they're all educated. They're going to say Iran, as you did. Iran, like E and an R-O-N. And it'll be somebody like W that says Iran. Now, if that area has been the culture, they identify themselves as Iranians. And you can see inscriptions going way back. Where did the word Persian come from? From the Greek word Pars, which was a very important city in the Persian Empire. And then they referred to all of these people as Parsis, and then it enters the Roman languages as Persians. And then you're right, polis means a city, and this is Pars, the city of the Persians. Now, Judy, I'll tell you one trick. During the hostage crisis, I mean, we didn't want to be labeled as Iranians. So how do you get out of this? There were two clever ways. So someone would say, "Are you an Iranian?" And you say, "No, I'm not Iranian. I'm Persian." Just like the cat in the carpet. Your average American wouldn't connect the two to say, "Well, we're talking about the same geographic space." My uncle, who was a minister in the Shah's government, he dealt with some sophisticated people in New York, Europe, and I was with him one time. They said, "Sir, where are you from?" And he had an accent. His English was good, but he had an accent. And he identified the name of his hometown, Malayer, Malayer. Do you think anybody had the courage to say, I've never heard of that place? And if you asked them to locate it on a map that Grayson will put up, I think most people might put Malayer somewhere in Central Asia or Africa. And that's what we're doing in these talks, is we're just a little bit of basic knowledge. So Malayer is a little town next to Hamadan, and Hamadan is a very important archaeological site for Persian ruins. So Ekbatana, many archaeological finds from that site are in the Louvre Museum, but there are still things that can be dug up. This would be an area of cooperation, because even the Islamic government takes some pride in that Persian history. They don't have the funds or the expertise to dig up what they had there. They might view it as a CIA front. We'd have to assure them that these are truly archaeologists. But I think if you went along with them, they wouldn't suspect that it is CIA.
Okay. At this point, I have to say we have about 10 minutes more in the discussion, and alas, we have many questions that we're not going to get to. I apologize to those whose questions I'm not able to ask. They're all excellent questions, but we will just keep pushing on and see how far we get. Why did
I jump in with one thing? So I'm always pushing books, and I know in the reading there were some books that were mentioned, so it's not that many, but this book.
Can I say, for purposes of just time efficiency, if you would like to send me a reading list, a recommended reading list, I can guarantee that it will get to every person who's watching this talk.
I'll do that.
So let's go on with the questions as far as we can. Why did Iran have a revolution? Let's go back to the basics. The revolution of 79, what was the difference between the Shah and the current system?
I'm jotting the I'm going to turn the question. Did the country in 1978, did they want an Islamic Republic? Not necessarily. Was there a broad enough movement to get rid of the Shah? Yes. The Islamic component of that challenge was very important. And as they settled scores within the country, the Islamic forces led by Ayatollah Khamenei, they emerged. And they also used the hostage crisis as a way of consolidating power. If you remember, there were non-religious leaders, Bani Sad, the ministers, they were all cleared out during the hostage crisis. I'm not sure that Khomeini ordered it, but he saw the opportunity to consolidate power. Now, what were some of the drivers? Is that the Shah and his people were seen as corrupt. They were taking too much power. They were taking too much money. The country was growing economically, but the gap or the perceived gap between the rich and the poor was too large for acceptance within society. As Iran became more modern, expectations were rising. There was a sense that the Shah and the elite were out of touch with Iranian values that included Islamic values. I'm not saying that the country as a whole wanted an Islamic republic with all the restrictions, but they felt that the Shah was not a good Muslim. The Shah, one of the things that cost him is the celebration. Go to Persepolis. That was a tipping. He celebrated 2,500 years of monarchy. And he was caught up in his ego and the expense. It was catered by Maxims, flying in French chefs. This was another sign of the decadence, or how out of touch the Iranian elite was with the poor in the south part of Tehran, in villages. I go back to my example. Is it somebody traveling to Iran from the West would have had a good time? You go there and you'd see people they're smoking dope, listening to rock and roll music in the 60s. My cousins had hair down to here, wearing mini skirts, but they were maybe too quickly trying to turn Iran into the south of France. And I think this bothered people that they didn't want to live that way, and they were not. They felt that these values were inconsistent with their own. It's a real difficult question, because I'm saying now this is not going to be a revolution. It's what you look at Russia, the various times. Why was it this particular time that Lenin and company could take over? These are the great questions for historians. Cuban Revolution. It's easier. We look back and we can say the Shah was a goner. I'll add one more. I think the Shah felt that the Americans didn't support him, that Jimmy Carter didn't support him, that Jimmy Carter was pushing this policy of human rights. And I think the Shah felt no matter what he did, if he cracked down, that Jimmy Carter would undercut him. People in my family that were there, I mean, they hate Jimmy Carter because they feel that if you had been tougher, if Jimmy Carter had not naively pushed for human rights in Iran, that what you would have had in Iran for the long term would have been a better equilibrium than revolution and what we got. And it ties into what I'm saying about Afghanistan is we have to be careful when we try to make the world exactly like the United States. It may end up being worse. And we have to be humble and say, is the United States really the model of good government and good relations among citizens for the rest of the world?
Yeah, that's interesting. All right. Questioner says, what would happen in the region if Iran were to achieve a nuclear bomb?
Optimistic scenario. For a long time, we thought, I mean, before we said you can't have Pakistan and India with nuclear weapons. They fought wars. If they get nuclear weapons, it's going to be horrible for the region. We're going to have nuclear war. So far, that the deterrence that existed between the United States and the Soviet Union, the United States and Russia has played out in the relationship between India and Pakistan. So the hopeful scenario is that it might even reduce conflict, or it won't increase conflict, that you have Israel is nuclear armed, you're going to have Iran nuclear armed. Do we think Turkey is not going to push for nuclear weapons? What about Saudi Arabia? But there is a chance that there is enough rationality. This is the difference between the Iranian regime has a stricter chain of command than in other countries, than in Pakistan. So if we're worried about loose nukes or nukes being used loosely or taken over by terrorists, by Al-Qaeda terrorists, it's easier for Al-Qaeda to take out the Pakistani regime than to take over in Iran and accelerate their nuclear program. I laid out that rosy scenario. I think if Iran gets nukes, it's a bad scenario. There'll be an arms race in the region. The tension between Israel and Iran will go up, and you can see the escalation. Is it even if Iran does something with conventional weapons against Israel, Israel will then hit them back. And if Iran gets hit back, they're not going to back down. And what I worry about is with those kind of countries that feel it's all or nothing, that you're going to have a nuclear weapon that's used. And then think of the loss of lives, the radiation, compare it to Chernobyl, and then think about the price of oil. It's a bad scenario. And maybe bad scenario for everyone but the supreme leader and those that want to stay in power. So that's the tension. They say to themselves, how come we don't try to take out North Korea? Because the North Korean government has nuclear weapons. It changes the stakes. The North Korean regime will be there for a long time.
Yeah. Why are 60% of Iranians under the age of 30?
Well, there was more reproduction at one period of time than another. That's the short answer. Iran is a successful example of their ability to do population control, birth control. Is that right after the revolution, they wanted to expand the population. They said this is a way to increase our military power, increase the size of the army. They then reached the point. They said this is going to be a problem for access to water, electricity. They were creating a population bomb. With family planning they were able to slow the birth rate down. I'd want to get the most recent estimates. So it's not growing as fast as it was after the revolution, but this is still, 30-year-olds, 20-year-olds, this is still the effect of a period of encouragement, relative prosperity. So the population grew. I wonder whether you're going to have the tip that exists in China, is if these young people are not able to get homes and jobs, they do what has occurred in other advanced countries. They're going to say it's too expensive to have kids, and the population growth that was very high might come down quickly. But the country's already, it's close to 90 million people.
We are out of time, but I can't resist ending with what seems to me a very optimistic question, which is, despite the lack of diplomatic relations, does Iran still welcome American tourists?
Yes, I've heard American, and if you're able to get in on a tour group, and I mentioned that 2001 trip, and it was a better time. What impressed my American colleagues, and we went to the 3 countries, they were amazed at how hospitable the Iranian people are. And they didn't feel oppressed in a way that people did in Damascus or Beirut. They were willing to talk, they took a risk, and there is a seductive aspect about Iranian culture. The food, the sense of display of gardens, flowers, the poetry, and they have a long tradition of hospitality that I think they extend to Americans. And if I were an American going, I would very much try to get on a tour that takes you beyond Tehran, to go to Esfahan or Shiraz or one of the other cities. And I think the charm offensive will even be more pronounced there because they have experience with fewer Americans. So if you can go, Judy, or anyone else is thinking about it, I would jump.
Okay. All right. Unfortunately, we're going to have to end it there. Thank you so much, Professor John Radsan. Thank you on behalf of the whole series, our behind the scenes people, Carmi Blyfus and Grayson Simmons. And thank you so much to the audience. You never let me down. I always assure our speakers that they are going to have an abundance of really interesting questions for these talks, and you never let me down. This is our last talk for this season, but Great Decisions will be back in the fall, and we hope to see all of you again at that time. Thank you very much. But for today, I'm going to say goodbye.